Yo, yo, yo. It is championship week, and I'm so excited because I have had a horseshoe up my ass. I've had 3 wins this past week by less than 1 point, 2 wins by less than 1/10 of a point.
Yeah, it was sick. I don't know.
So we're feeling good. We're dancing, and that's all that you can hope for this time of year. So if you're joining us in this week 17 performance, you've made it. We're here. Let's get this bread. We've got new father, old-time baller, Drew Hannis on the show. Drew, congratulations on the birth of your son.
Thank you. That's my fault. We haven't been back the last 2 weeks, but it's great stuff, dude. And I'm happy I'm not sleep deprived. I feel good.
Look at him. He's happy. He's healthy. He's ready to take up some ships too. So do you have any teams remaining this year?
I have 2 championships I'm in this week. I feel real bitter about the one dynasty that we're in where you beat me the first week because my team just straight up didn't show up. I put up 60 in a playoff matchup. It just made no sense. And then this week,
you what 206, right?
I had 206, so I would have pounded everyone and then moved on to the championship if my team just remembered that the playoffs started the week before. If I had a bye, I'd be sitting there right now.
Yeah, it is funny because we played the week before, and I was like, I don't really care if I win this because I don't think that I have the team to make it happen.
And I said the same thing. I literally said the same thing. And then I beat you and snuck into the playoffs that way.
Yeah, for sure. And it may be, I think the team is good. My quarterback situation is horrendous. I made some bad decisions before the year started. I was not a Tua believer. I was like, Bryce Young's new, young, and hot. Let's go get it. Let's make some moves. That has backfired. But I've been strangling through the season with the likes of the Ryan Tannehills, the Nick Mullins, the Joey Flack, the Don, holding it down for my squad. But, I mean, also mostly CMC, Justin Jefferson, etc.
Yeah, you have a legit shot to win this week, I think, because CMC his matchup is insane. It just smells like Alvin Kamara 5-touchdown week in the championship. Like it just smells it. Like
shout out Chris Coburn for that. He still messages me about that performance because I had him in the Jordan DeFigio OG back when I was first meeting Drew.
Yeah, that's when
look at us now.
Jordan ran that league.
Yeah,
like
I had Alvin Kamara that Christmas. It was a great time. But cool. So let's keep it moving. So if you remember, first part of the show that we do is going to be some injury updates. So what do we got going into this very critical championship week? What are we looking at on the injury slate?
We actually have a lot of stuff here to cover. I want to touch on Keaton Mitchell before. Obviously, this is going to be a long-term thing, something we'll discuss going into next year for dynasty purposes. He tore his ACL. I just want to bring him up because for me, I think that he's a buy low. I think that he's a great player. I think he showed us a lot in Baltimore, and I think that he's a guy that if you're playing in dynasty leagues, if you can go acquire him in this offseason because he's going to start slow next year, I think he's a guy that I would try to go after. But he tore his ACL.
With ACLs the way that they are right now, what do you like? Do you think it's realistic that he starts this season? Do you think it's something where like he starts on like the PUP and then like comes back at some point mid-year? Like, because it's pretty late to have that kind of injury happen.
Yeah, it's late. I mean, Kyler Murray tore his around this time last year, and you saw how long it took for him to get back. It's kind of a weird situation, though, with ACLs lately because most guys are kind of useless their first year removed from an ACL. That's what you expect in most cases. But, like, you saw Breece Hall and Javonte Williams come back much sooner than you'd expect. So, I mean, medicine's changing all the time. But to me, I think that he'll probably miss a bunch at the beginning, especially because how late it is. Also, he struggled with injuries before his ACL, so I think that they'll work him back slowly. But I just think that he's a really good player, and I think that he's worth going after and getting because I think his value is going to be very low.
I think there was a lot of if you go back and look at like the combine kind of time around last year, there was a lot of hype about him. I think the knock and the worry was just like his size.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a couple people that fit that profile, but there was a number of people that had him ranked as like a top 5 running back as far as like profile. It was just like, how is the size and can he break into like a good landing spot to make that happen. Baltimore, it was kind of suspicious. Like you had J.K. Dobbins, you have like this slew of backups, but then kind of the seas have parted a little bit and he really made the most of it. So I think to your point, if you are going to buy low, I think it's important that you do it early. I think he's going to start to get that buzz the beginning of the season. Is he going to play? Is he not? So I think you either do it right away as soon as the season ends if you don't have like a trade deadline, or you make it happen. I would wait. Like if you wait until the season, it's going to be too late, or you almost have to wait longer until it's like, all right, he's not going to come back to start the year, and then people are frustrated again.
Yeah, for me, we draft our rookie drafts early, like right after the real NFL draft. I think that's like the prime time to go get him, see if someone wants to move up. Maybe you could package moving back in to acquire him.
Yeah, it's not a bad play.
I think that's where I would be looking to get him.
Yeah.
I think he took that backfield over, and I think it was worth mentioning that going to get him going into 2024 is something that everybody should be looking at.
Cool. What else you got for us?
Cortland Sutton, he's in the concussion protocol. Robbie Chosen is in the concussion protocol. I have a bunch of guys listed here in the protocol. And CJ Stroud, I wanted to bring up. I think that he's going to come back this week, but it's definitely concerning because he missed 3 games with that concussion. That's not something that I expected. Obviously, we talk about this all the time. The protocol is the protocol, and it's different for every guy. It's a non-linear injury, but 3 weeks is kind of a lot. Especially I think this is his first pro concussion. I think that there's some risks there with CJ Stroud, and hopefully he stays healthy, but 3 weeks is a lot.
I wonder if not that they're like withholding him just because, but I mean, I think it's fair to say that Houston has far exceeded their expectations of where they thought the season was going to be. And I don't think that they would want to end up in a situation where he has like multiple concussions. So it's like, could they potentially be slow playing it just to protect him from himself, sort of thing? Really hard to say, mostly just speculation there. But
he never got into the first step though, where he was able to be limited practicing. That's the thing that's so concerning. Like he just made it to that step, I think yesterday or today. Yeah. So I mean, I think that he's working his way back to play this week, but it's just 3 weeks is a lot and definitely something to monitor. And then pair of Dolphins, Raheem Mostert suffered a shin injury. He ended up playing, but he only had 13 snaps last week. So it's definitely something to monitor if that's something that could linger in the next week. And if you're in a championship, which I'm sure there's a lot of rosters out there that have Raheem Mostert, if you have another option, I think that it's something that you need to think about. Not playing Mostert, because 13 snaps, he's going to be touchdown dependent, or else he's not going to pay off for you in your championship matchup.
Yeah, they did say that he's one of those guys that they feel comfortable with him playing despite practicing in a limited role. Baltimore is obviously going to be a pretty tough matchup for them. I think it's going to be probably the best game of the week. I'm really excited to watch it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's definitely a scary proposition. It doesn't sound like he's going to practice at all, if anything, which is weird because he came out of that game saying, "Oh yeah, I was fine, a little bit banged up, like no big deal."
But he didn't play enough for you to not question it, you know.
Oh, for sure.
Snaps, you know. Jalen Waddle, he suffered a high ankle sprain. It sounds like he's definitely going to miss some time. I think that they even said that he's unlikely to return before the playoffs. So if you have him in your lineup, you definitely got to go find another option. I like their matchup this week, obviously. And I was looking at them for my OnlyFantasy and decided to go to a different route because I was thinking about Robbie Chosen as a potential OnlyFantasy, but obviously with him being in the protocol, it's too much of a risk there. But if he doesn't play, Jalen Waddle doesn't play, you're looking at Cedric Wilson, Chase Claypool, and Tyreek Hill just going completely nuts in a championship matchup. But one of those two guys, Cedric Wilson or Chase Claypool, could be relevant this week.
What a crazy story that would be, because I haven't looked at their depth chart lately, but do you know out of the two of them who they would throw in there first? Because it's like I feel like they tried to utilize Claypool when they first got him, and then like he's getting false starts. He wasn't making the right blocks. And they were just like, all right, like, no, like we're not doing this. So does Wilson ultimately have the leg up on him in terms of
Yeah. So I actually was looking at this last night and took a screenshot. So it's funny that you asked. They have Braxton Berrios behind Hill, Robbie Chosen behind Waddle. That's why Chosen was my first choice to put in
Mm.
there at OnlyFantasy.
I think Braxton Berrios I would play over any of the other two, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I
He
mean,
had some like sneaky games at the end of last year.
yeah, but he was lining up in the slot more when they were doing that. They have him lined up on their depth chart as an outside guy, which I thought was weird. I don't know. I think Cedric Wilson is definitely in play because he's listed as a starter. But Durham Smythe is also someone that you could look at as well because he's had some
Sure.
flash games as well. But one of those guys is going to come out of nowhere this week, and he's going to be like the perfect DFS play, and someone's going to hit on a ton
Oh
of
yeah.
money based on that. But yeah, I was liking Robbie Chosen, but I think that it's probably unlikely that he plays. He took a nasty hit last week, and he's in the protocol.
Yeah.
So something to monitor. Jordan Addison suffered an ankle injury. I don't really know. He had to get an MRI, and there's not much that was said about that yet. The Vikings don't really seem to be playing for much either. I'd probably just look at a different direction. And then his teammate TJ Hawkinson, he also tore his ACL and MCL. It's going to be done for the year. Another guy that we'll be talking about going into next year as someone that could be delayed. It's tough, but he's a good player. You have him in Dynasty. Obviously, you're going to stash him and keep him, and it's kind of weighed that one out.
On that note, do you think that given that like Hawkinson, obviously a top end tight end in the league, especially in fantasy, do you find yourself, if you're somebody who has Hawkinson you're playing this week, you wouldn't consider another tight end from Minnesota to fill that gap, would you?
You might have to, right? I mean, there's really not much out there in terms of tight ends. We always talk about this, but I know, was it Josh Oliver?
Josh Oliver would be the next in line. Yeah.
Yeah, his split percentage for ownership shot up last night. So
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely people out there that are going to throw him in there. He looked fine. He had a couple targets and he had a long pass completion early. Like you never know, but it depends on what you have out there. It's tough to try to make a decision like that the week of a championship. But to me, I'm probably going to your chart and I'm going to identify probably the best couple matchups and just hope for the best there. You never know.
Yeah. Somebody that I would consider who there was a lot of buzz going into the year about him, but he's picked it up of late is Chigo Okonkwo. He's been looking nice the last couple of games. He got a touchdown pass from Derrick Henry of all people last week. Mm-hmm. So they're utilizing him a lot more as of late, especially since Will Levis took over for them. So he's somebody that people probably don't have on their radar, but it's been kind of like a sneaky back end, like tight end one play. But yeah, Oliver, obviously interesting, but I don't really see a lot of the appeal there for sure. But
the other guy I would look at too, we're going to talk about some of these other guys later, but I think you can look at Noah Gray as well. He still gets a lot of targets, even being behind Kelsey, and their matchup is phenomenal this week. Like the chart's not showing it. I think that it's a little bit, it's a little off based on Pat Fryermuth's goose egg that he put up last week. If they give you remove that, there could be some more. Like they're probably the best matchup for tight ends if you remove that game.
You're talking about the Cincinnati is?
Yeah.
They're definitely up there. I know that the Steelers have been pretty high up there too. But yeah, they're definitely a solid play. I know whenever I posted the charts last night, some people on Reddit asking like, hey, like, what are you feeling about Mahomes this week? And it's like, knowing that Pacheco's hurt, they don't really have a lot of options. Like, I feel like I don't know if he's necessarily a top 5 play, but I definitely think that he's in the top 10 this week. They're going to be throwing the ball a lot. Cincinnati, like from like a defensive perspective, what's been saving them really from being more porous than what they've shown analytically is that they've been really good about getting turnovers in like critical moments, kind of like the bend don't break philosophy, but like they're crushing drives from like timely interceptions, and that didn't happen against Mason Rudolph last week. Hey, but so it's like, to me, it's like if they can't get him to turn the ball, like I feel good about Mahomes. I think he's going to have a lot to prove. I think Kelsey's been hearing a lot about how he's washed and all this stuff. So I think you're right. He's primed for a big day. So
have you been looking at Mahomes over the last few weeks though?
He's been struggling really badly.
The last 5 weeks, he's tight end or QB 16.
Yeah.
Average.
It's funny. You had all of these people from Chicago, like, and how much they hated Matt Nagy as their head coach. You lose Eric Bieniemy, everybody's like, oh, Andy Reid calls the plays. It doesn't really matter. Matt Nagy is just completely ruined the Chiefs. Like, it's just, I know it worked in the past, but they're not getting it done right now. I mean, you look at that receiving room. I mean, Travis Kelce's what, 34, 33, 34? Like,
Yeah,
Father Time's probably catching up with him a little bit. Sky Moore done for the year, hasn't panned out the way that they'd hoped. They should have got DeAndre Hopkins. Like, that was like the in the face, like, makes perfect sense kind of move. Who would have thought that like Juju still could be the best receiver on that team, like with his like paper knees that he basically has right now? Like, it's just that whole team is a mess, and it's like, yeah, like he's struggling, but I don't know what you do about it. Draft better, I guess.
Juju's in New England before the chat rips you apart.
No, I know, but he was the best player on their team last year.
You're still thinking last year. Okay. I mean,
But like, I'm just saying, like, they would have been better off keeping him than the people that they're throwing out there now.
I like Rashee Rice. I think he's been good.
Rice has been solid for sure.
He's just not dynamic in the sense that like he's not Tyreek Hill. Like he's not. I don't think Rashee Rice is a 1, but he's a very, very good 2. They need to get a dynamic number 1 outside receiver.
Well, especially now that Kelce is slowing down, because like they're like, all right, well, we can kind of like handle him. Now you have Rice, who's like, all right, like he's solid, but they just don't have anything really dynamic. Pacheco's a hard runner, but I wouldn't say like game breaker in the sense he's just kind of like wrecking ball type. But yeah, we'll see what happens. I think the downfall of Mahomes is kind of what everybody expected last year.
Kelsey's been getting blanketed with double coverage. Like they're playing zone with a guy lining up right on top of him, and it's just not working. They need someone else to step up. That way they can't do that to him. But I just, for me this week, I don't think Cincy is good at covering in the middle of the field. So I like Kelce this week, but I think Noah Gray could have a big game as well.
I like it. Cool, man. Any other injury updates on your radar?
Yeah, let me just touch on one more. Trevor Lawrence. He suffered an AC joint sprain. He's essentially that Ben picture where he just iced all over the place.
Yeah.
Trevor Lawrence is just getting destroyed, but he just continues to go out there and play. Like, for me, I don't know how he's going to play with his AC joint sprain. Like, it seems like it's a pretty severe injury.
Because that's the throwing shoulder side too, right?
Yeah. And that picture where he got hit when he was running in his face.
Oh, man, dude, that was brutal.
Like, Trevor Lawrence is going through it, and the dude is just tough, and I think that he's just going to end up playing anyways, even though it probably shouldn't. But, yeah, he's going through it, and he's just not a guy you could start right now.
No.
Like, even if you have no one else, like, I'd rather you go with who I have for OnlyFantasy this week.
Sure.
Go out and play Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, it's really shocking. Like, has he taken good strides forward? Yes. Also having Carolina, like, they're a negative matchup across the board defensively. Actually, the 4th lowest points allowing defense in the league right now, which kudos to them. They've really turned it around. Last couple of games, at least putting up a fight. Granted, Green Bay, Atlanta, and New Orleans not really known for their amazing offenses, but I think everybody kind of expected a little more from Trevor Lawrence this year, where it's like he was the most prized pick, since Luck, where it was like he's been this generational talent, like through high school, through college, like through whatever. And like you haven't seen him elevate that game to that level yet. We've seen flashes of it for sure. I know in the beginning of the year we were talking about like, hey, like he's not delivering, but like the accuracy's there, like the points will come, like, but it just hasn't panned out. And I obviously don't think that Jacksonville will move on from him, but I think people are starting to realize that like the golden era of QBs where you had you had Brady, Manning, Roethlisberger, Phillip Rivers, like all these guys that could just like sit on their couch, do whatever, and then just bang out a 300-yard performance like it was nothing. Like those days are gone. Like the QB play has definitely declined since all of those guys have finished up. So it'll be interesting to see. I think defenses have evolved as well, and they're just willing to let people get small chunk yards and hope for a field goal. But yeah, it's a different game, man. It's weird. But cool. All right. So on the QB front, as we transition into headlines, we've had a lot of quarterback shuffling going into week 17. Typically don't see guys getting benched per performance reasons, especially for older players who you may not expect to really have another chance in the league. But we've had over 35, 36 starting quarterbacks. Or I think it's actually 46 to 48 quarterbacks that have started a game this year. Way more than I think the NFL wants to have. So probably be looking at some new rules in the offseason. But 3 new names to go into the fire going into next week. So Jared Stidham getting the start as announced today by the Denver Broncos. They want to maintain financial flexibility for Russell Wilson. I know we talked a little bit about this before the show, Drew, but anybody you think is going to want to trade for Russ going into 2024 with that contract?
You said that you never know. I just don't see it. I just don't know. I mean, Denver would have to pick up like a ton of money. It makes no sense. We were talking about it being like one of the worst contracts like last year, and Russ has actually played well this year.
That's what's crazy to me is like Russ has played well.
Yeah.
Like, what are you benching him for? Like, it's just how do you go back to him if you can't find a trade partner?
It really is not about his play. It's just that they don't want him to get hurt in the last 2 weeks, and then everything just goes to crap. Like if he tears his ACL, like things get worse. So it's just like we'll just sit you down for the last 2 games. But it's just like he's played well, and I still don't think anybody's gonna want him. That's the problem for me. Like, you know what I mean? Like he's aging, and he's not playing at a high enough level to earn that contract and to win football games, even with a good roster. Like, I just don't see it. And it's just,
it's very weird. So we already talked a little bit about the Cortland Sutton injury. So that really leaves you with Jerry Jeudy, who really hasn't been on the fantasy radar too much this season. Any level of confidence that you would throw Jeudy out there with Stidham at QB going into championship week?
No.
Great.
Yeah. So I actually had some notes here, and this is just a DFS thing. Like, I'm not going to play him in a championship, but I think the guy you want this week for DFS is Marvin Mims.
Even after that horrible fumble that he had last week.
Yeah. I mean, he's a rookie. He's going to make those mistakes, but like it was his best game, like actually route running, targets, receiving yards. He led the team in receiving last week. And I just think that Jared Stidham probably is more familiar with working with Marvin Mims during practice. So I just think that he's a guy that I'm going to have him in like every DFS lineup, because I think that he could just come out of nowhere and just have a big crooked number, and that's how you're going to win some money. So I'm looking at Marvin Mims. I'm looking at Javonte Williams. We talked about Javonte Williams before the show, and I looked a little more into it. Jared Stidham doesn't tend to go deep. Like he was in the top 50 in the 2 seasons that he's played the most. He was 55th and 44th, or 58th and 44th in deep ball attempts. I just think he's going to be a dump off guy.
King, yeah,
which that could hurt Marvin Mims. I think that he's a deep threat. You don't know, but I think that Javonte is going to get a lot of dump off work, and
I'll be very curious how they deploy Mims, just because they said the reason that he hasn't been getting on the field is that they feel like he's a very redundant piece to Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah, I mean, who's the future though, right? I don't. They've been talking about trading Jeudy for 2 years. You know what I mean? Like they're sitting Russ because they're worried about future plans. I think that they're just going to go out with the young guys the last 2 weeks, and I think that Marvin Mims is a good DFS play the next 2 weeks, and maybe one of the 2 weeks he hits.
There you go. I like it. So next on the list, Jacoby Brissett getting the start. Sam Howell getting benched is really surprising to me. I know he struggled as of late, but what is Washington really doing? It seemed like Sam Howell was turning into the best QB prospect of last year's draft, and it's really fallen apart, which is funny to me, especially because everyone's like, oh, well, now that Matt Canada's gone, if Eric Bieniemy gets fired, you need to bring him over to Pittsburgh. And I'm like, not so fast. I mean, I feel like the weapons are there. They have Brian Robinson. They have Terry McLaurin. They have Jahan Dotson. They have Logan Thomas. They have all of these guys, and they haven't been able to put it together. So how are you feeling about the Washington receiving room? I think it gets a little bit of a bump up from Brissett. He looked good in relief last week. I think Terry McLaurin probably the biggest beneficiary of this. I think Brissett's going to lock on and just feed the man.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably start McLaurin either way. I don't think that there's much of a needle move for me. I think that Sam Howell was playing, like, he had some pretty brutal interceptions, but I still felt like he was putting up yards. He was helping the receivers out. He was throwing touchdown passes. Like, their whole season has just been him throwing it in garbage time. He's going to be the second most sacked player in NFL history in a season behind David Carr. I've been riding Sam Howell alt line on passing yards like every single week on DraftKings, and it always hits. Like he always puts up a ton of yards, and they're just always down big early. Their defense has just been so bad.
So bad.
They were down 27-7 last week at halftime. The week before that, 13-0 midway through the second, which that's not too bad, and they weren't moving the ball. But
Yeah.
31-7 against the Dolphins. They got dominated right out of the gate against the Cowboys on Thanksgiving. It's just they're not a good team. There's so much pressure on Sam Howell as a player. Like, it's just too much for a guy that's starting in his first year. Like, imagine if Kenny had to go through what he was going through over there. Like, he'd be falling into a ball and curling up.
The circle button on his controller would like no longer show a circle because
Yeah.
he'd be doing that spin move so many times.
Yeah, like Sam Howell's just had a really bad season. Not him playing. It's just like he was just put in the worst.
It's unfortunate, like, yeah.
And I'm not a Sam Howell guy. Like I wasn't a guy that liked him in the draft. I didn't want anything to do with him. I wasn't a fan. But like I thought that he played pretty decent for the situation that he was put in. Honestly.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I liked him a lot his junior year. Like it was like, oh, it's like either going to be Ritter or Howe, like QB1. And they both kind of didn't live up to the hype in that final year that they played. So it's interesting to see how like it's all unfolded. I'll be curious what that means for them going into next season. I feel like Washington could very much find themselves being somebody that trades for like a Justin Fields or something like that going into next year. I also could see a scenario where Washington sneaks into like the Jaden Daniels like sweepstakes or something like that. I don't think they fall
a high pick, right?
Yeah, I don't think they fall like to the 1 and 2 like landing spot for like a Drake May or Caleb Williams, but I think that they could be in play for Jaden Daniels or something like that. So
I can see Jaden Daniels going to the top 5. It just reeks.
I think you could too. I mean, after Anthony Richardson went 4, I think it's totally possible. Especially he won the Heisman. Like if you look at a lot of like the big plays that he had, like he was absolutely ridiculous this year. So I think once he tests and does all that stuff, I think the big thing for him is going to be the weight perspective. And then we'll kind of go from there. But yeah, we'll see. But yeah, so we got those two. We already touched a little bit on the Giants. We'll talk more about them later. So we'll skip the pleasantries on Tyrod Taylor. And then we also have Nick Mullins might be finding his way on the bench. Fortunately for my fantasy teams and himself in the second half, he remembered that just throw the ball to Justin Jefferson every time and things will mostly work out. So we'll see in 2 QB leagues. I really like the matchup for him this week, and we'll see what happens. But transitioning to some other news, we had some really big playoff performances last week, maybe from offenses that you may not have expected. So Breece Hall drops a 40 piece, had a million receptions last week, big game. And then you had Amari Cooper put up the highest point total of the week, broke 50. I actually survived against Amari Cooper in 2 different occasions.
Yeah, which was nuts. Like
one of which the guy forgot to put him in his lineup, which is unfortunate. But I'm not mad about that. And then the other player that's kind of had the sustained run, Joe Flacco. All 3 of these players going head-to-head this Thursday. Really tough defensive matchup for guys that really have carried you to this point in the dance. Drew, how are you feeling about playing against the Jets defense or against the Cleveland defense, knowing how they've kind of just annihilated people all year? Are there any of these guys that you wouldn't play?
So I have Breece Hall in a championship on my team. I'm sitting him. Cleveland is just absolutely insane at home on defense, like on top of how good they've been all year. I have good options, though. Otherwise, I have Jonathan Taylor. I have Saquon. I have a lot of good guys on my roster, and my wide receivers are deep. So for me, I would sit Breece Hall if you can. But if you can't, obviously you're going to play him and just hope for the best. I'm also very terrified because I also play him in my biggest league where I'm in the championship, and I'm very terrified that Breece is just going to make me eat my words. Joe Flacco, it's crazy because like he's just hot, dude. Like he's just on fire. You know what I mean? Like
the last time that he did this, he went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I'm terrified of that. Like I can't. That can't happen. That just can't happen. Like if you're a Raven fan and he goes to the Super Bowl with the Browns, That's like if Roethlisberger wins the Super Bowl with the Browns. I wouldn't be able to handle it. Wouldn't be able to handle it. I think you could play Flacco though. I think you could play him.
Flacco, the Jets have given up 8 points per game in the last 3 weeks. Washington, Miami, Houston. Obviously not like world-beating matchups. I think that was the first game without Stroud. So like they've had a pretty easy run of it. But even if you go back like 5 weeks, I feel like they've really been just kind of like crushing it. Let me take a look
Are we
here.
talking two? We're talking 2 QB though, right? Because like Flacco really.
Flacco, I wouldn't start in a single QB league now.
I think you could play him in a 2 QB league because he's been good with a lot of different guys. So it hasn't just been Amari Cooper. I think David Njoku has really taken a step up since Flacco came in the league or came back to the Browns.
Oh yeah, Njoku's been a top 5 tight end since he's come back.
Yeah, and I think that you can probably work Njoku inside against the Jets.
I feel more comfortable with Njoku and Cooper than I do playing Flacco. Because I think the receivers can get enough tread and they're going to be throwing the ball enough that like they can get the receptions. I do worry about Flacco interceptions and like not really getting the yards and touchdowns from like a QB perspective. So on the season, New York's averaging 16.3 points per game, which is 20% lower than the NFL average for fantasy points per game. Last 5 weeks, they've been giving up 11.8. So they played the Howell Brissett week 16. You had Tua put up 15. Stroud's injury game, he put up 4. Desmond Ridder 10. Tua put up 16. The last time, then really, they had Josh Allen put up 27 on him. Justin Herbert put up 8.5 with like 8 fingers. Hurts put up 28.7. Wilson put up 22.7. Mahomes 19.3. So I feel like you may be right. They've had some pretty easy QB play. But yeah, it's scary for sure.
It's really just for 2 QBs though. I think if you're in the top 20, if he gets 15 to 20 points, he's probably in the top 20, which is what you want.
Ground him. This is perfect timing. All right, cool. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how it all unfolds. But yeah, I think Flacco, like I think you've convinced me. It's been like Jets have been really good against bad QBs. They've been a little bit more porous against QBs that are better.
It's just hot hand for me.
Yeah,
that's really all it is.
It's just like, who are your other options? Like, we'll see how it shakes. But all right, let's transition into some fantasy football Tinder. If you haven't been with us for the first 17 weeks of the season, get ready, sit down, and get excited because we're about to get weird up in here. Let's just clear this comment real quick so we can give the full exposure of what we got going on. So let's pop into our little sideways mode here, and let's kind of give an example, Drew, of like how fantasy football Tinder works. So if you haven't been with us before, you're like, man, I'm pumped for this championship. Let's just give you a little example. So we got our friend here, Zach. Zach and Tyler have been pretty busy this holiday season, raised over $30,000 for kids to help them have a good Christmas. So kudos to the boys out there. So if we're thinking about was it rocking around the 412 a success in year 6, everyone already knows that that's a swipe right. That's a yes. You're going to get hit with the green hearts. And then if it is not, you're going to see the red X's pop up onto the screen. So we're pretty pumped about that. But let's dive right into it. We talked a little bit about him before. Travis Kelce, been on the struggle bus a little bit as of late. He's entered a new era in his Eras tour. Your fantasy football bench. Drew, what are you doing with your boy, Travis Kelce?
Yeah, I've been talking to you about this privately for a few weeks now. I have my championship team, my big one. I have Trey McBride and Travis Kelce on this roster, and it's been real tough to not play Trey McBride. But I've been playing Travis Kelce because he was my first round pick. Just got to ride it out and trust the dude. The last 2 weeks I've been sneaking by, and I've been like looking at Trey McBride, and I'm just like, damn, what could have been? But I'm gonna ride it one more week. I'm gonna swipe right. And it's really just because Cincinnati, like I alluded to it earlier, they've been awful. They've been awful against tight ends. I really think if you take Mark Andrews out when he got hurt on the first drive against them, and you take Freiermuth's Goose last week, they've given up at least 60 yards or a touchdown to every tight end they face since the last I have a number of weeks here. his last 6 or 7 weeks. So look at
So
these numbers for some of these other guys, though. Dalton Kincaid, 10 for 81. Kittle, 9 for 141 and a touchdown. Evan Ingram, 10 for 83 and a touchdown. Freiermuth went for 9 and 120 against them a few weeks back. Like they're getting decimated by tight ends. And I just think that Travis Kelce's finally going to have a big week in the championship.
yeah, no, I'm with you there. I mean, it has been a bit of a struggle. No, I don't think that Taylor Swift is the reason that like he's been struggling. It's such a stupid thing. But I'm with you. I'm rolling with them this week. I do like the matchup. I think that Cincinnati is stronger against the ground, and they also are having injuries. So even from like a pass catching scenario, they're more likely to put McKinnon into space, CEH in space. So I like the matchup for Mahomes. Mahomes is gonna get the ball to his boy. I obviously am curious about how it pans out for next year. I personally think that Kelsey's going to retire, but we'll see what happens. Either way, it's been a heck of a run, and I think that we'll see how it shakes. But cool. Sliding into the second Tinder that we got here. So Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard may be one of the worst first-round picks of this year's draft. I think there were a lot of expectations after Ezekiel Elliott left and took his talents to New England that, all right, Tony Pollard's going to be kind of like the main guy. How can he handle it? But has really faltered in his time as kind of like the preeminent guy. They don't really have anybody that's taken too many snaps from him despite his struggles. But Drew, championship week, are you riding the Pollard Express?
I'm also facing Tony Pollard in that big championship, and I hope I don't eat my words about him either, but I wouldn't play him. Deshaun Elliott play, I do want to talk about that real quick. Like everybody's like ripping Tony Pollard for that play online about how
you're talking about that like walk-in touchdown that he cut in like for no reason.
Did he cut in? I guess
yeah, he did.
My thing was just like I thought Deshaun Elliott just made a hell of a play. I just thought that was just like he put that one arm out and he just pulled him back. You know what I mean? Just moved the ball. Like his whole body got in except the ball. It was just a sick play. The thing with Tony Pollard though is you can look at all the numbers you want. 64 red zone touches, second most in the NFL. He has the same amount of red zone touchdowns as Rico Dowdle, and who only has 17 touchdowns during that in the red zone. Like that's crazy. 17 touches versus 64, and you have the same amount of touchdowns. Detroit's defense has been terrible all year, but their run game has not been bad, and it's actually been stellar. I think he has the worst matchup this week. Over the last 3 weeks, they've given up 11.4 fantasy points per game against Minnesota, Denver, and Chicago. And you look at the numbers, Madison went 2 carries for -1. He got hurt. Ty Chandler went 8 for 17, and he just happened to get a sneaky touchdown late to give him 7 fantasy points. Javonte Williams, 12 for 27, 2 catches for -7. He had 4 fantasy points. And that was his only game over the last 5 weeks where he had single-digit fantasy points. Chicago, Khalil Herbert, 3 for 8 yards. Roschon Johnson, 1 for 6. Deontay Foreman, 11 for 50. They've been doing really well against the run, and they've been absolutely terrible against the pass, which the Cowboys can absolutely sling it. Dak's going to have a huge week. CD's going to have a huge week. Jake Ferguson, I like him. I just think that there's not going to be enough for Tony Pollard. I just think that's going to be an air raid offense this week.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Looking at like Detroit from weeks 12 to 16, their run defensive DVOA, they're top 9, top 8. They're top 9 in the league, so they're at minus 21.4% on the run, compared to on the passing side 21.3. So pretty much to your point, like they're doing a much better job on the defending the run than the pass. I'm with you. It's going to be a swipe left. I actually have Pollard in one of my championship teams. He's going to be on the bench for me. I have James Conner has a little bit of a tough matchup as well, but at least like he's proven that he's able to perform in tougher matchups. I think the thing that stands out to me, and you hit a little bit on this as far as the red zone carries, but Tony Pollard has 15 carries inside the 5, which is the most predictable way to know that like someone's going to score touchdowns. He's 2 for 15.
Yeah, he's been like CEH this year. It's been weird.
Yeah, it's been super strange. So for me, it's like in this sort of championship game, I'm happy that I don't necessarily have to play him. So we'll see where that goes. All right. So we got Chad in the chat as always. He has 2 questions for us. So one, Did Zach Claus get you guys anything for Christmas this year? No. Ball on a budget, I guess. Forgot about us little people. Just some funny pics that don't send because Drew's phone has been dedicated purely to videos and pictures of his child and us, of course. But serious question from Chad. He's made the championship in his work league, and his QB situation is a mess. Already dropped T-Law and Goff. Their matchups are great. Added Russ, he got benched. So here are some of the options that he has. So Carr, Zap, Bryce Young, Mason Rudolph. Man, that's tough. Let me consult some things real quick. So yeah, I'm gonna take a look. So New England's going against Buffalo, so that's gonna put Zap out for me. The New Orleans Tampa Bay game. Tampa Bay is actually a plus matchup for Carr, so like that could be decent. But like I do not like Carr at all. Like he's like the greatest quarterback from the 2020, but you need those last 20 yards. He can never get it done. Bryce Young actually looked really good last week, but can he do it again? I don't know if I feel great about that. Carolina also has a good matchup against Jacksonville. They've been pretty porous across the board. There is one other name that has popped up. So you got Stidham, Tyrod, or Heineke. I know who Drew's going to pick. It's probably going to spoil some things for the show. But I'll let you go first, Drew. Who are you going to pick?
Do you just want to pull up the graphic while we're doing it?
Yeah, we can. Why not? We're already here. So, Chad, please hold your thoughts. Stick around for 2 to 5 business minutes because it's time for OnlyFantasy, the only place where you can have all of your dreams come true in the context of fantasy football, unless you're me who never guesses correctly on this thing and just do it for the lulz. But Drew,
I had one good one this year, and it was the week before when we missed 2 weeks. But my Jaden Reed pick was pop.
Your Jaden Reed pick was pretty great. I actually think I still have the graphic for that somewhere in the archives. But OnlyFantasy week 17, your championship OnlyFantasy, you're popping champagne on this man and celebrating. Drew, who you got?
I would feel just absolutely terrible if this OnlyFantasy pick is just an absolute dud and you play him.
I wouldn't. We don't get paid for this. We're doing our best.
Yeah, we just do this for fun. My OnlyFantasy this week is Tyrod Taylor, and he has the best plus matchup based on Joe's chart for this week. He's only had one start this year where he actually made it through the entire game, and he had 25 fantasy points that week.
Yeah. 24.9 against the Rams for QBs. They're giving up 51.1 for wide receivers. Absolute madness.
And this is a gut play for me. It's matchup. He's able to use his legs. Hopefully he can give you a solid floor there if he can get like 10 rushing attempts. The thing for me is the Rams are just going to put up so many points that I just think that Tyrod's going to throw it. Mason Rudolph in the rain 52 times against Detroit. Like, I just think that he's going to throw it a lot. And who knows, dump offs to Saquon. They're going to have to run up the score to keep up with the Rams. And I don't see them just getting absolutely blown out. That's just not really how Brian Daboll handles things. But the Rams are averaging 32.4 points per game over the last 5 weeks. And they put up crazy numbers against good defenses. 36 points against the Browns, 31 points against the Ravens. Like, I just think that Tyrod Taylor's in a position where he has a good matchup. They're going to have to score a ton, that he could just sneak his way into like the 20 to 25 fantasy point range. He had 12 fantasy points last week, and he only played the second half of football against a good defense.
He was willing to run last week too. I mean, he looked good.
Yeah, I just think he's going to backdoor his way into like 20 fantasy points. I just think that's how it's going to roll.
I like it. Well, there you go.
And that's fair. Or Tyrod Taylor has been getting hurt. That's really my only concern. They could go back to Tommy DeVito, but
I don't think they're going back to him. You wouldn't make the switch if you were contemplating like putting him back in.
Yeah. That's why I ultimately have gone with Tyrod Taylor. There's always the risk though. I just think that Tyrod Taylor is going to get a full game. and I think he's just going to backdoor his way into like 20 fantasy points, and he's going to be a top 10 option.
Yeah, I actually just looked in our life league. So my quarterback situation for that league is Mullins, Flacco, Mac Jones, Mason Rudolph, Tommy DeVito, Bailey Zapp, Bryce Young, Ryan Tannehill. Like I have like literally anybody. I had when Tyrod went on IR, I had him. I guess I got rid of him, but I don't know who has him now. But
He's probably still out there.
no, I just checked while you were. Yeah, I looked. Somebody has him, but
if you had to pick two of those guys, though, like you have to start two. So who are your two?
Yeah, I know. It depends on how much I drink beforehand, but I was contemplating. So let me do this first. So my only fantasy for the week, despite the rumors, is Nick Mullins. Nick Mullins threw for over 400 yards last week. He remembered that Justin Jefferson is Justin Jefferson, and they also won't have Jair Alexander for Green Bay because, like you mentioned before the show, apparently he went on the field for the coin toss and wasn't supposed to, so they suspended him for a game. So they're already taking out their best player, which, like, I have been like pretty like tough on Matt LaFleur because I think like he's been like overrated as a coach, but like that's pretty ballsy to do. Like I like that. Like
how come AB didn't think of that? It's genius.
Yeah, I know. Like that's like major like wide receiver one energy right there. Like this is the baller move. But it's a good matchup. They're at home, divisional game. I know there's concerns that he might not play, but like he doesn't throw the hospital balls, and I don't think Jared Hall is like something that they're going to want to explore. Like he's their backup, he'll be fine, off to a good start. So I think he's locked in for me. The decision I'll have, and I was leaning benching Flacco up until we got on the show today. So really, to me, it goes down. There's three players that I would even consider. It's going to be Bryce Young, which I just don't have enough confidence in to do week over week. Although it would be funny to beat Eddie with Bryce Hall.
Or for Eddie to beat you with Tua.
Yeah. So pros and cons. And then Mason obviously has potential there, but I mean, a lot of that was yak play. So it's like, how do they manage that? The hard part is with Flacco playing on Thursday, I'm gonna have to make that call like pretty quick.
I'm worried about. I wouldn't play Mason because they're going to Seattle with the 12th man, and their secondary is very good.
Yeah. So I'll probably just roll with Flacco. He's been my dog.
The Steelers would have to win this week on the ground, and Seattle can't stop the run. So I don't think Mason's really your play. I do want to add one more thing because I had so many notes on Tyrod Taylor, but I didn't really like go through them.
Go for it
very well. So Derek Carr against the Rams last week was QB2. The week before that, it was Sam Howell, Jacoby Brissett. Combined, they were QB5, and then before that, Lamar was QB1. So like they're giving up top 5 QB play to whoever's out there. I feel like as long as Tyrod gets the whole game, I think that he's going to be a top 10 option.
And I think too, it's like I never feel good about like a coach going into the week saying like, oh, like we're not sure what we're going to do about it. Like, what time is the Minnesota game on Sunday? They play the late game, so it's like the last thing that you want to do is, all right, like, I don't know if he's going to play. All the other options that I have are gone now. And then, oh, well, like, I have no QB now. Like, if I'm playing against someone that might be throwing against Nick Mullins, I'm dropping whoever is meaningless and going and picking up the other QBs for Minnesota.
Yeah.
Because I'm petty like that. All right, one buzzer beater question from Chad, and then we'll wrap things up. But I don't really understand it, but the ETN versus Najee. This is for you.
He's wondering who we'd go with. I mean, ETN has a horrible matchup, and the Jags just really haven't been good the last few weeks. Like, on the ground, Carolina's giving up 18 points per game on the ground. They're one of the worst matchups based on your chart. And I just, for the Steelers to win, Najee's going to need to have 15 carries, and he's going to need to put the ball in the end zone. I mean, Jalen obviously is going to take from him, but I just think that they need to run them into the ground on Sunday. They have to. That's how they win in Seattle.
I dig it. Cool, man. I like it. All right, so you heard it here first. Tyrod Taylor going to be a championship hero. Nick Mullins. All right. So before we wrap things up, as always, give you all the places that you can find us, follow us, do all of those other weird things. So our personal Twitter handles right there in the chat, or I guess on the screen. You can find us for any start sit questions. We publish our 3-week fantasy football rolling average points allowed charts on X at 412FF show. Obviously, if you're watching the show here, we're on YouTube and Twitch and live. What is it? Linktree, whatever that thing is, at around the 412. Always a good time chopping it up with y'all. Appreciate the questions in the chat. But go win some ships this week, unless you're playing against me. I need that cash. I'm about to be moving, so trying to get that bread. But we'll be here next week for those Week 18 Warriors. I don't know how much we'll have to talk about, but we'll throw some stuff out there. We'll have some fun. We'll recap the year. And yeah, hopefully we'll have some champagne to celebrate all the ships. But this is Joe. That's Drew. There's a baby over there somewhere. Just balling.
Yeah, he's up there crying. And shout out to Zaina for being in her first championship this week.
Hey, girl.
In her girls' league. She went 11-4, and now she's in the championship. She better pull out.
Let's go. Big Z. We like it. All right, y'all. Y'all have a fantastic week, and we'll celebrate appropriately next week. So thanks a lot.
Later.